One second, I'm going to share my screen because if I don't read what I wrote, I will forget half of it. And then I will expand where my face is. So for your viewing pleasure, what the hell? Can't put the stupid mouse on. Okay, let's go this way. I want to make it as big as possible because I want to show you some books. Um, Hopefully this is tucked away on the corner here. Let's see if I can get this light on me a little better. All right, here we go. So, I'm gonna need to scroll this up a little bit. Yeah. All right. So this is an introductory video for a series that I am gonna call. Actually, I don't know what I'm gonna call it. Maybe I'll call it the I does this just because I'm ghetto. I does this series where I'm basically, in a sense, gonna teach philosophy. That's my goal. So let me get into it. You're gonna hear my little story. Probably boring and unnecessary, but yeah, I'm gonna say it anyway. So, basically, reading this. As an undergraduate philosophy major, I had the intention of becoming a philosophy professor. Like, I thought of like teaching at some big name university, maybe even not a big name, but just at a university. So that meant that I was going to have to get a PhD. And so, yeah, I studied towards getting very good grades, and applying to PhD programs because you want to go to as good a PhD program as you can because that'll improve your chances of getting a job. Anyway, and it also presumably will make you give you better training as a philosopher. But anyway, so but sometime before graduation, I realized that yeah, the PhD wasn't in the cards for me. Um, Basically, I had burnt out on philosophy. So like the thought of doing philosophy all the time or enough to keep a job, like yeah, it was more like I said, dreadful than exciting. So I knew that yeah, my career wasn't going to be as a professor in philosophy. Now, so I graduated in December of 2003. So in 2004, I started tutoring privately. And then I got a couple of jobs for some companies, tutoring and also like teaching like ESL or the TOEFL test, the SAT, the verbal sections at least because my math is like horrible now. ACT, PSAT, ISEE, SSAT, all these standardized tests I tutor or have taught in a classroom. But only this year did it occur to me that I could be teaching philosophy online here on YouTube. Um, Now it's going to be my way of teaching. It wouldn't be like what you'd get in a classroom exactly, but it would be something that you would get if you took graduate courses in philosophy, where they will sometimes do line by line readings of a philosophy text. This is not going to be line by line reading. I'm going to be doing the line by line reading, but then I'm going to present it to you as my exegesis on what I'm doing, but spelling out maybe in excruciating detail all the steps that I'm taking, all the things that I see and that I'm thinking about. Well, not everything I'm thinking about, but anything pertinent that I'm thinking about, so that you can see how I do philosophy. It's 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 going to be my effort to make as explicit and as detailed the process that I use when I do philosophy. So yeah, so that's the plan. So as I say here, my plan is to start a series of videos in which I do philosophy. Except I will make explicit the steps in the process. My hope is that by seeing how I do philosophy, which isn't to say it's the only way, obviously not. You can do philosophy various ways, or the best way, like it could be, but I doubt it. That you could pick up some good habits that will benefit you when you do philosophy yourself. Okay, now in my experience, I want to say vast, but in my experience, again, I don't know. Again, I've said it in other videos. I say it all the time anyway. I graduated from UCLA in 2003 with a BA in philosophy. I did exceptionally well in my classes. I was a very, very good student. And if I can hubristically say, I was probably the one of the two better students that graduated in his class. Um, yeah. Anyway, so my experience is that mediocre philosophy students, which is the vast majority of philosophy students, focus extensively on criticism and refutation. They're in love with criticizing Wittgenstein, Frege, Russell, and and they're like, yeah, I found a weakness in his argument. I found a fault or an error, or not a mistake, but usually not a mistake. But anyway, so they love criticism and refutations because they think it puts them on level with these philosophers or above these philosophers, which it doesn't. And it's not a good practice when you do philosophy, um, because it's easy to do. It gives you a false sense of how good you are at philosophy, and it's not impressive actually. So this is what I found for most philosophies, or they're in love with their little pet theories that they have. Like I have my theory on perception, I have my theory on knowledge, I have my theory on whatever. It's not like I don't have mine. I'm in love with mine, but I didn't. This is not the thing that I cling to. This is not the only thing that I offer. Right. So in the hopes of preventing you from falling into this trap of like focusing on criticism or maybe even solely focusing on criticism, I'm going to present my videos so let's say I take up a topic. Let's say it's the problem of universals, or let's say it's the exegesis of some essay or some chapter in a book. I'm just going to present, I'm just going to state in one video, I'm just going to state the problem and explain what the problem is, the philosophical problem. So if it's the problem of universals, I'll state the problem of universals and explain why it's a problem. Or if it's a chapter in a book or if it's an essay, I'm going to just do the exegesis. The exegesis meaning my interpretation of what the philosopher is saying, being as charitable as warranted. Um, but that's it. I'm just going to present his theory. This is his theory. This is how he says it's supposed to work. This is what's supposed to be happening in this theory, and that's it. As long as we understand his theory, no criticisms. Now, as I read, like red flags or whatever things like go off, I'm like, no, this doesn't sound right. This seems to me like not really like a strong inference, or this seems to be not like the best thing to like think is happening here. So these things happen, and I take notes and I put them aside. But initially, we just want to understand the theory. The second video, the follow-up video, will be criticism. Then we'll hit all the things that we think are somewhat less plausible than other alternatives, or maybe even like implausible or dubious or just flat out wrong, right? Or we might just have a different intuition than the philosopher has, and we're just pitting our intuitions against his intuitions, and who's to say our intuitions are not the correct one, and his intuitions are not the correct one. So it'll give us like at least pause to like accept his view of things, just like we don't have to accept his intuitions. Anyway, so the second video will be the criticism, and then together with uh, our revised or my revised understanding of the problem or of the theory in 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 light of the criticism offered or in light of the criticism that I see is warranted or merited or apropos here. So that's it. So those are going to be that's how I'm going to do it. Now, as I say, I want people new, especially people new to philosophy, to understand that one of the hardest things in philosophy is to simply state the problem at hand. Explain why it is a problem in the first place. If you can do that, like I said, you are well ahead of the average philosophy student at UCLA. They can't even do that well. You just state the problem. It's harder than you think. Just state the problem, explain why it's a problem. Or again, like I said, if you're going to do exegesis, just tell me the exegesis. Don't give me the criticism along with the exegesis. Just give me the exegesis. Give me your interpretation of what the theory is or what the argument is according to the text, according to the author or the philosopher you're reading. Later, after you do that, then we can worry about criticism, right? Where you point out weaknesses in the argument. Okay. That's that's the plan for the series. It's going to be it's always going to be a set of videos around focused on one philosophical problem or one essay or one argument or one chapter even and depending on the chapter, depending on the book. All right, now, so let me continue. So right now, the tentative plan is to kick off the series with the first problems by explaining maybe each chapter or select chapters in E.J. Lowe's book, A Survey of Metaphysics. I purchased it. Here it is. I told you I was going to look into it, and I have. And from what I read, I liked it. This just came in the mail like 10 minutes ago. I haven't even looked at the introduction. I haven't looked at anything in here. But I've seen the reviews and I read a little bit before about it, like on the, so I know that the writing is good. And from what I take it, EJ Lowe has a kind of a unique perspective, and a lot of what he says seems to align with what I think. So like, I don't want I don't want to suffer from confirmation bias, but it's always feels good when you find a philosopher who who thinks along the lines of what you've thought, especially when you've had like non-traditional thoughts. So it'll help like reinforce what you've thought, or maybe add some nuance to what you've thought, or hopefully you don't suffer from confirmation bias by just reading more of what you already think. So I have this book, and I'm thinking I'm going to kick off the series by doing chapters, select chapters. But again, since I haven't looked at them, I don't know yet. I also have another book which I said I was going to look into, Alyssa Ney's metaphysics book. This is from the Rutledge series, and like I said in the description box in that video, she has taken over Michael Liu. Well, Liu was and very good, by the way. Liu was very good, and I haven't read Alyssa Ney, so I can't comment. I'm sure she's good. Um, he used to do this series for Rutledge, and I have his book. I have his book. Um, Unfortunately, I can't find some of the books I wanted to show you guys because some of the books I'm going to draw on uh, to do these videos. So, yeah. So here we go. So as I say here, I'm thinking of doing chapters from A Survey of Metaphysics, but since philosophy of language is my strength, if I can say that, my forte, my preferred field, I can keep doing this. I'm gonna thinking of redoing because I've done this video already, but not in the format that I plan on for this series. Getty's famous essay, and I choose it because it's only like 3 pages long. Is justified true belief knowledge? The general consensus is that it's not, and not based solely on Getty, but Getty has a strong influence on why the general consensus today is that it's not. My view is that not that justified true belief is knowledge. I think maybe it might be, but my view is that the general consensus has been informed heavily by Getty's essays, and I think Getty is completely wrong in his essays. So, or in his essay. So, yeah. So, but we have to understand the essay. It's really it's an excellent introduction to what people mean by saying that knowledge is justified true belief, and then we get at what the problem is supposed to be. And because Getty does such a good job of giving an intuitive account of the problem, that it's going to help us understand what our intuitions are towards knowledge. Now, I think he's wrong. Again, I think he's wrong. But first and foremost, we can learn a lot about justified true belief and what our conception of knowledge is, our intuitive conceptions of knowledge is, before we start criticizing Getty here. And albeit I'm just a lowly BA student, and Getty is a renowned philosopher, PhD, well respected. Like, so I'm not saying I'm right and Getty is wrong. I'm saying I have arguments, and I think my arguments are more compelling than Getty's arguments. But ultimately, that's going to be left to others to decide. I think. I don't think that, but I think I'm right, obviously, and I think Getty is wrong, and I think I have logic and reasoning on my side. And I just think that when things get weighed out, like I have the better arguments. Okay, and I don't want to. And the reason I say I don't think it's up for you guys to decide. Well, specifically if you're new, like you can't decide. You're not the decision makers when it comes to right. We'll rely on professional philosophers, philosophers that are very good at what they do, or just like we would just think of it just like as logic will decide in a sense. Anyway, so I got sidetracked. Now, so I might start with Getty. Um, but whatever exactly the problems are, um, that I choose, or the essays that I choose, uh, I can tell you that they're going to come from one of four subfields in philosophy. I doubt I will do anything in any other subfield, just because I'm not well versed in these other subfields. I have some familiarity with logic. I have some familiarity with philosophy of mind, um, but I don't really generally read this stuff. I mean, other than logic, but mm, this is not the place for logic lessons, I think. So, one, philosophy of language. Philosophy of language is my favorite field in philosophy. I still think it's the most important subfield in philosophy. Um, within philosophy of language, we'll talk about problems related to meaning, to reference, to truth and semantics, to sense and content. So think Frege. Use and pragmatics. Think Wittgenstein. Communication. Indexicals. Maybe David Kaplan. So these are the fields that I'm planning on doing. Questions, problems within these fields, but not exclusively. But this is the ones that I thought of. Then epistemology. I like epistemology, and I've read a lot of epistemology, but I wouldn't say I'm like I do it anywhere as much as I do philosophy of language. But like everybody else, I have intuitions about knowledge and things like that. So knowledge is obviously a big thing in epistemology, and sometimes it's just epistemology is called the theory of knowledge. Uh, Justification. This is really big. This is the whole, basically the crux of the Gettier problem. Contextualism, um, and relativism in epistemology. Okay, metaphysics. These are the traditional big three, like metaphysics, epistemology, and maybe logic or maybe philosophy of language. Metaphysics, ontology, what there is, identity and persistence over time, time, presentism, for example, would fall under time, the theory of presentism. And properties. Maybe the problem of universals falls under this heading of properties. And the problem of universals is old, it's famous, and it has a lot to teach us. Uh, so, yeah, I'm really interested in that topic. And then when it comes to ethics, I think I don't know. I think I'm only going to talk about, if I talk about it, and I'm not even sure I'm going to talk about it, is moral particularism, which is my pet theory. I know I said it, people with their pet theories, but it's my theory on morality, on ethics. I am a moral particularist. I think Jonathan Dancy is the most famous moral particularist. There are others. And then there's other good philosophers that have their own slight variant on moral particularism. You can be a moral particularist, but there's different like what's it called? Anyway, there's different kinds of moral particularists. Now, I have views on ethics. Like I think Kant is completely wrong. I think Mill with utilitarianism is completely wrong. But I'm not really focused on making moral arguments. One, I think it's mostly fruitless. Two, I think the approach that people take to ethics is generally wrong, especially people who do meta ethics and um, prescriptive ethics. It's not called prescriptive. Anyway, yeah, I think ethics is more like language. Like there's no meta language, right? You don't do meta language. You study language and as a social phenomenon. And so you study it how people use it. So if you want to study, let's say, if you want to do philosophy of language, maybe language is not used the same way in as people like use it in America, then maybe the Inuits use their language. Or maybe the Chinese don't use language in the same way. Now I'm not talking about like language rules. I'm just talking about the way they think when they do language. And it's kind of vague. Anyway, so Anyway, my point about ethics, let's get back to it because I was getting sidetracked and kind of lost. My point in ethics is that I'm not a moral relativist, but I think you have to study ethics as a social phenomenon and explain how ethics works in a particular culture. So, yeah, so in some cultures, like people have a general intuition that, let's say, I don't know, spanking your kids is wrong. Like they think spanking is wrong, that you shouldn't inflict any kind of violence, if we can call it violence, on your children. And in other cultures, they think, no, it's not only wrong, it's a good that needs to be implemented because it's a necessary good. You need an important way to teach children lessons, and if you don't use it, you're probably going to do a bad job of parenting. So, for example, so spanking in another culture, their intuition is that spanking is good. And if you have intuitions that are different in different cultures, like yeah, good luck doing a meta ethics. Good luck doing an ethics that encompasses both cultures accurately. Like it's not going to work, I think. So yeah, so part of my intuition about ethics is that you have to do it as a social phenomenon from culture to culture. Um, and my other intuition is because of that, related to that, it's kind of like a Gestalt philosophy or a Gestalt ethics, or you take a broad picture, and more particularism could fit a Gestalt philosophy of ethics where it expresses the idea that no particular moral principle is correct. Like stealing is wrong doesn't exist as a moral principle because if it were a moral principle, it would apply across the board. In every case of stealing, you would have to say this was a wrong act because the moral principle, stealing is wrong, is true. Moral particularists reject this idea. They reject that there is such a thing as moral principle. So the particular more so the moral principle stealing is wrong cannot be applied across the board. And so there's going to be situations, or we can conjure up situations in which a particular act of stealing was not wrong, or maybe even morally correct, morally right, or morally justifiable, however you want to phrase it. So that's the difference. That's the major difference between moral particularists. Moral particularists, such as myself, deny that moral principles exist. Now, we know what they are, so we also know what unicorns are supposed to be, but we don't really think that they're real. They don't apply to morality. You can force them and apply them, but okay, but we think you're doing something wrong, and ethics doesn't work that way. Um, anyway, so but that's just so. And again, there's so many divergent views, and I realize that moral particularism is in the minority, and I don't know if it would be fruitful to try to argue it. I just think it'll be a harder job. Anyway, so I might explain the theory. In, I'm not really interested in like arguing it for it to try to convince people that I'm right. Like it is what it is. I can state the theory. I can give you my arguments, and then yeah. But I think I can defend it against anybody else's ethical theories because I think it's the better theory. And of course, I think my arguments are better. In this case, not always. In this case, I think I have the better arguments in favor of moral particularism than other people have in favor of their theories. All right. So let me just show you the books that I have. I showed you the E.J. Lowe. I showed you the Alyssa Ney book. Um, let's go down the line with some metaphysics books. I have, like I said, I told you Michael Liu he used to do the Rutledge series metaphysics book. I have that book. I think I have it here on this list here or on my stack here. This is Universals and Particulars. I wish it were in such a small book, just because of the font is not terrible, but very good book on particulars. I got this book today too. This is an interesting book. This is called "Why Does Language Matter to Philosophy" by Ian Hacking, or maybe Ian. I want to say Ian. Um, and yeah. So we have the major division of the book into three parts. He calls them the heyday of ideas, the heyday of meanings, and the heyday of sentences. So interesting division. So and I'm big in philosophy of language, and this is like Wittgensteinian in the sense of why is language so important. I have a book, Alston's Realism and Anti-Realism. So this is William Alston, very good philosopher. So I might draw like yeah chapters. I might do an exegesis on chapters of that. I have here. Actually, let me switch over to the stop sharing so I can just show you the books. Okay, here we go. I have the 20th Century Analytic Philosophy by Avram Stroll. Avram Stroll is another lucid philosopher. I think I didn't put him on the list. Avram Stroll, recommended, lucid philosopher, 20th Century Analytic Philosophy. Uh, as I said before, I read a lot of Scott Soames. I have Soames' book here. This is The Dawn of Analysis, Volume 1. I don't believe I have Volume 2. Um, but since I haven't gone through this, I'm like, maybe I'll hold off on getting Volume 2. This is Philosophical Analysis in the 20th Century, Scott Soames. And since I'm into the analytic philosophy, I have the Rise of Analytic Philosophy, 1879 through 1930, from Frege to Ramsey by Michael Potter. Very good book, uh, especially if you're into the history of analytic philosophy or just analytic philosophy in general. 20th century philosophy, the analytic tradition, which is the real only tradition that matters. The continentalists are garbage. Readings in the History of Philosophy. This is by Morris Weitz. No, it's edited by Morris Weitz. As you can see, Wittgenstein, Russell, and I'm assuming G.E. Moore. I'm assuming. Could be Quine. But anyway. Okay, more. This is Tooley. Michael Tooley is a very good philosophy of science guy. Uh, analytic, Analytical metaphysics, particulars, actuality, and identity over time. Com- uh, Prohibitive. I do not recommend you study identity over time. It is like, yeah, it gives me headaches. More Scott Soames. This is the Monster Tome, The Analytic Tradition of Philosophy, Volume 1, The Founding Giants. I think there's now a third edition. There's a third book. I have the second book on Kindle, which I have not even looked at. And then there's a third book. I forget the title and what it encompasses exactly. Anyway, so I have that. Uh, I have this black, this Blackwell anthology on analytic philosophy. This is edited by Martinich, who's famous for doing the philosophy of language anthology, and David Sosa, who I mentioned in the other video, although I didn't list him, but I did mention his name. And then one more book, which I probably won't look at for this series, just because it's slightly out of the group. It's slightly out of the subfields that I want to talk about. Uh, if I had included a history of analytic philosophy, which I love to do, I would include this book because I think it's a good starting place if you're going to do, if you want to understand the beginning of analytic philosophy. And this is British Idealism by W.J. Mander, who's an excellent writer, by the way. But I didn't recommend him in the series because he doesn't really do like philosophy of like metaphysics and epistemology and philosophy of language as was requested for the video introductory books or lucid writers in analytic philosophy. But excellent, excellent, excellent book. So I have that one. Okay, let me put these aside and let me get to my the last like eight here. And I have more. Like I said, I have William Lycan's Routledge series Philosophy of Language, which I can't find, which is really bothering me because yeah. And I have Audi's epistemology book from that series too. Like I said in the video, I have both his first and second edition. Okay, let's jump to some philosophy of language books here. I don't know if you can see this. This is Colin McGinn, Philosophy of Language. Colin McGinn is a very good philosopher, very good introduction to some perennial philosophical problems here. Uh, the general breakdown, like, and then there's there's essays within each of these major divisions. One division is Frege on sense and reference, right? His Sinne Bedeutung. Kripke on names. Kripke is probably the biggest name in philosophy in the last 50 years, 60 years. Uh, Russell on definite descriptions. Bertrand Russell. Donnellan's distinction. Donnellan is also big in philosophy of language and logic. Kaplan on demonstratives. David Kaplan. I took classes with David Kaplan. Um, Evans on understanding demonstrative. Putnam, Hilary Putnam, on semantic externalism. I forget Evans' first name. Tarski on theory of truth, and Davidson, semantics for natural language, and Grice's theory. Remember I mentioned Paul Grice in the other video of speaker meaning. Uh, I don't see Searle on here anywhere, but that's okay. All right, so philosophy of language column again. I also have this philosophy of language book by Alexander Miller. Um, He has also major divisions and then articles under each major division. Frege, semantic value and reference, so same sense and Frege and Russell, sense and definite descriptions. Three, sense and verificationalism, the logical positivists, which you probably would study if you studied the history of analytic philosophy. Skepticism about sense, number one. Quine on analyticity and translation. Then it's going to be skepticism. Yeah, skepticism about sense two. Kripke's Wittgenstein, which sometimes it's called Kripkenstein, and the skeptical paradox. Six, saving sense. Response to the skeptical paradox. Seven, sense, intention, and speech acts. Grice's program. And speech acts, and Searle's also famous for speech acts. And sense and truth. Tarski and Davidson. And finally, sense, world, and metaphysics. Okay. Uh, yeah, so probably some Hillary Putnam articles. Okay, good stuff. This is really good stuff. I'd forgotten how good that stuff was in there. Um, I have this book, Philosophy of Language: The Big Questions by Andrea Nye. Not Alyssa Ney, but Andrea Nye. Maybe that's how that Nye name got stuck in my head. Okay, so let's see if this is worth. Um, Part one, language. What is it? With about 9 articles underneath. Part two, meaning. How do words get their sense? Same thing with like 9 or 10 articles underneath. Actually, not that many, 5 or 6. Part three, speaking. What is it to say something? Part four, reference. What do we talk about? Part five, truth. What is the relation between language and reality? And part six, other minds in foreign tongues. How is it possible to understand what someone else says? Okay, general stuff. Then I have this book here, which is called Readings in Semantics, but basically it's philosophy of language. And yeah, this is edited by Farhang Zabih, E.D. Klemke, and Arthur Jacobson. And I don't know if this one's worth because it's too big. Oh, it has major divisions also, and then under each major division, it looks like it has like, mm, no, let's not go into it. It's just a bunch of philosophy of language essays. Let's not need. Okay, back to some metaphysics stuff. This is an interesting book. The evolution of modern philosophy. The evolution of modern philosophy, metaphysics, modern metaphysics, making sense of things. And that's the focus of things. This is the study of how philosophers have attempted to understand what things are, what makes things what they are, kind of idea. Like maybe essence. This is by A.W. Moore. And so it's a kind of like almost like yeah, it's kind of like a unique perspective on doing metaphysics. Like all metaphysicians don't do metaphysics by studying what things are necessarily, but the ones that have done that and how that has like that study has evolved, or how progress has been made, let's say, that's what Moore is taking a look at. So it's like a yeah, yeah. So part we have an introduction which has like 9 sections or 8 sections, and then part one. The early modern period, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Hume, Kant, Fichte, Hegel. Part two, the late modern period, the part the late modern period one, the analytic tradition, Frege, the early Wittgenstein, the later Wittgenstein, Carnap, Quine. I need to this book I need because like I like I my understanding of Carnap and Quine, who are two giants in analytic philosophy, like I it's almost nil. Uh, and then David Lewis is heady stuff. That's hard stuff, I think. And then Dummett. Okay, then part three, the late modern period number two, the non-analytic tradition. What? I didn't know this was there. Nietzsche, sense under scrutiny again. I love Nietzsche. Bergson. I don't know much about Bergson. Metaphysics as pure creativity. Husserl, making sense of making sense, or the ne plus ultra. And then Heidegger, letting being be. Collingwood, is that AG or AC Collingwood? Metaphysics as history. And Derrida, metaphysics deconstructed. Deleuze, something completely different. And then the conclusions. Yeah, I think I'm not interested in the non-analytic traditions, even though I love me some Nietzsche. Okay, so interesting book. Then I have P.F. Strawson's book, which was on my list, The Analysis of Metaphysics, An Introduction to Philosophy. By the way, I didn't really mention that most of the books that were on my list of philosophers, not most of them, more than half, I'd say, I have. I don't know why I didn't mention it at the time. Like I said, I had some of them, but I had more than like I was saying. Anyway, so Analysis of Metaphysics. Um, I don't know if this is not like I would go with the Rutledge series. Either get the Michael Liu version, the older version from his the Rutledge series, or get the Alyssa Ney version. She's very good. Also, get that for your metaphysics introduction. And same thing with epistemology, get the Audi book. And same thing with philosophy of language, get the Lycan book. Although some of the ones that I showed today would also be very good, but I think if you're new or if you're just like fresh philosophy undergraduate, that Rutledge series is going to be really helpful to you. Yeah. So, for example, this Strawson book. Here are the 10 uh, essays. Analytic philosophy, two analogies. Reduction or connection, basic concepts. Moore and Quine. So you're already talking about Moore and Quine. Moore and Quine in an introduction to a metaphysics book. Okay, I can see it's pertinent, obviously, but like I wouldn't have gone there. Like especially Quine and like why Moore exactly? I know, like okay, logic, epistemology, and ontology. Okay, so now you're given epistemology and logic in this analysis and metaphysics book. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it as an introductory text to metaphysics. Seems to be a little bit it's too like scattered in the topics that the essays that are included. Classical empiricism, the inner and the outer action in society. Truth and knowledge. Uh, I would have left that for philosophy of language. Meaning and understanding. I would have definitely left that for philosophy of language. Causation and explanation. Okay. Freedom and necessity. Okay, fair enough. But good writing, just like I wouldn't recommend it as an introductory text, especially if you're new to philosophy. Now, one of my favorites, like I mentioned, and I, I didn't mention that I had his book, Metaphysics, Peter von Inwagen. Good stuff. Good stuff. And this is the old Rutledge, the one that Alyssa Ney is now has taken over. This is Michael Liu in the Rutledge series, Contemporary Introduction. This one's all marked up. It's not my marking, but it's cleaner than I thought. It's just on the outside. Okay, great. It's not the I can read it, but if it has the underlining highlight, it bothers me. Um, all right, so yeah, I have this book. Excellent, Michael Liu, excellent. I also have David Campbell. David Campbell? Keith Campbell. I knew that sounded wrong. Metaphysics: An Introduction. Keith Campbell is an excellent philosopher. I do not recommend this book for beginners. This is just Yeah. Um, I'm not saying it's poorly written. It's not. It's very well written, and he's an excellent philosopher. And for my taste, this is the kind of stuff that I want. This is for me. This is like I have a BA, right? That puts me a little bit. That puts me significantly ahead of people just into philosophy, and so I can appreciate and I can like get a lot out of a book like this. But I wouldn't pick this like if I had picked this up before I went to UCLA, like good luck. I wouldn't understand. Uh, okay, so let's see. Chapter one, a sketch of the background, a sketch of the background. Oh, these are not headings. These are just the names of the essays in chapter one. The classical tradition, appearance and reality, the response to the problem of appearance, metaphysics and crisis, Hume's fork, Kant's modest proposal. Okay, so it's just a bunch of metaphysical topics, a bunch of essays, and it's good stuff. It's just not introductory stuff, I think. Although it wouldn't be insurmountable for some people, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't have jumped there. And then finally, I have this book, which is actually a pretty good book, introductory book. I feel like my mouse is on the screen. Anyway, uh, Errol E. Harris. I had never heard of him past 2 months ago. Fundamentals of Philosophy, a study of classical texts. Okay, so if you want to get into philosophy, this might be a good way. This might be a good way. Let me see exactly before I finish this overly drawn out video. By the way, I got a haircut. I give myself haircuts. The front doesn't ever look terrible, looks decent, but the back is all jacked up. Anyway, so but I say to myself, I've never get a hair. I never go out and get a haircut. I'd rather look stupid for a week because by that time my hair will grow out and it'll like blend in, which my shitty tapering job in the back and uneven. But I can look stupid for a week if it's going to save me like $20 every 2 weeks. So this is remember this is a classical text. So he talks about Plato in part one. So in chapter one is the introduction. Um, the four essays in there are learning by doing, the branches of philosophy or the subfields of philosophy, philosophical method, and philosophy and the history of philosophy. Then we go into part one, chapter two of Plato, and then so he talks about yeah the Greek background of Plato, so the Ionians, Pyth- the Pythagoreans or Pythagoreans, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Zeno. Then he has a summary, and then he has the sophists, and then he has Socrates, and then he has suggestions for further reading. I want to give you the contents because I really think that if you're new to philosophy in general and you want to start, like I've made a video about which books you might approach, but this book in particular might be good because it covers a lot of stuff that like people are going to be interested in. Chapter three, he talks about virtue and knowledge, and the text he focuses on is Plato's Phaedo. And the headings under that are goodness and voluntary action, the right and the expedient, knowledge and goodness, criticism, and then five ideas and the knowledge of reality. And then he has suggestions for further reading. Chapter four is immortality. Again, the text is the Phaedo, continued. The first proof, the second proof, the third proof, objections and misgivings, and Socrates' reply and then suggestions for further readings. Chapter 5, the theory of forms. Chapter 6, body and soul. And all of these chapters have further readings. And I'm not reading all the subdivisions. I realize it's going to take too long now. Then we go to part 2, Descartes and rationalism. Chapter 7, the ghost and the machine. Chapter 8, Descartes' method. Chapter 9, I think therefore I am. Chapter 10, the criterion of truth. Chapter 11, the existence of God. Chapter 12 of God, Chapter 12, Judgment and Will, Chapter 13, the ontological argument, Chapter 14, the existence of material things. Then we go to part 3, empiricism, where we talk about Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. It's Berkeley, by the way, not Berkeley. It's Berkeley. The university is called Berkeley, but the name is actually Berkeley. The philosopher is Berkeley. Anyway, chapter 15, John Locke and the ways of idea and the way of ideas. Chapter 16, primary and secondary qualities. Chapter 17, the idea of substance. Chapter 18, knowledge of the real. Chapter Chapter 19, the representative theory of perception. Chapter 20, Bishop Berkeley's idealism. Chapter 21, refutation of realism. Good luck. Chapter 22, God and Reality. Chapter 23, Failure of Subjective Idealism. Chapter 24, Hume's Psychological Atomism. Chapter 25, Cause and Effect. Chapter 26, Skepticism. Then with part 4, we go to Kant. Rationalism versus Empiricism, Chapter 27. Chapter 28, Reassessment of the Position. Chapter 29, Space and Time. And that's it. No, that's not it. Sorry. There's only three more. Chapter 30, a priori synthesis. Chapter 31, categories and principles of the understanding. Chapter 32, the status of metaphysics. And finally, part 5 is logic and language, which is chapter 33, logical atomism. We have Russell's logical atomism. I don't see Wittgenstein's, but yeah, if he explains logical atomism to you as like as someone who's as you as a beginner and he makes it accessible to you, like amazing, amazing. I have the book. I have Russell's logical atomism book. I have Wittgenstein's logical atomism book. But this is an introduction to logical atomism. So like I might read this before I take on those books. Like okay. Anyway, I might. But usually I don't go to secondary sources first. But it's just an introduction to the to a problem, right? Or to a view. So it's not necessarily his argument for it. All right, so that's it. Those are the books I have. Those are the books I'm going to draw from. There are more that I have. I have a ton of philosophy books. It's almost embarrassing because I haven't read them. I pick and choose. Like I said, I never claim to read I don't claim to read philosophy books cover to cover, uh, and I don't think I need to. Um, But yeah, and on any given topic, like I have several books that explain the topic to me, or any philosophical view. Like I have several books, I have access to several essays by different philosophers that do that, and that's just usually helpful. Okay, that's it. I'm rambling. So that's the goal. I'm gonna try to put the first. I'm gonna read the first maybe chapter or two chapters of E.J. Lowe's book, which I'm really looking forward to. Um, and I really want to hear. I want to read his take. I just think it's going to align with a lot of what I've always thought about. And then if I think I have like a strong, really strong grasp of his material, then I can present it to you in even a more simplistic, not with a negative connotation, or maybe a more simple way, so that makes it even more accessible to novices. This is already an introductory text, but philosophy introductory texts are not like the normal introductory text to any other subject. It's still going to be difficult. And so these texts cannot dumb down the material too much because then the text becomes like doubly long or like it just if you wrote a text to try to like teach a 10-year-old these ideas, you would have a 2,000 page text for a book that could be 300 pages. My videos are going to expand and expound and give you the ideas and hopefully easier ways to like process or come at it from two different approaches or give you different analogies or give you different metaphors, whatever, but I'm going to try to make things accessible to you the way that I would have appreciated when I studied philosophy. Because like anybody else, when I studied philosophy, I really didn't have much background in philosophy. And what I thought I was doing, what I thought like, oh, I'm good at philosophy. I have a knack for this. I have some natural talent. I read a bunch of Nietzsche, which I had. I went into UCLA having read a ton of Nietzsche. And I'm like, and I'm like, I get Nietzsche, and I'm like good at it, and like I'm gonna go there and like blow the doors off UCLA. It didn't happen. Like my first class with Professor Andrew Shue, which was just a lower division philosophy class. So it was a class that like had like 300 students. Like all athletes were in that class. Everybody was in that class because it was a mandatory class, or it was one of the classes you had to take. You could take in philosophy to satisfy a requirement. I got a I got a C plus on my midterm. That's the lowest grade I've ever gotten in my life. In college, not in. I failed many classes, but and the soccer girls in that class were getting A minuses on there. I'm like, what? Like, how are the soccer girls kicking my ass in philosophy? And just because I didn't understand how to write philosophy papers. I didn't understand what I should be including, how I should be arguing, and what I shouldn't be including. Because I included like in my Descartes, it was a midterm about Descartes, and I included quotes by Nietzsche. And when my buddies, my philosophy buddies, because I made friends with like 8 or 9 guys um, that also transferred in. I was a transfer student, and they read my essay and they're like, dude, what are you quoting Nietzsche in here for? I'm like, because it's apropos. He's has something to say on the topic. And I'm like, they're just shaking their head and laughing. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, somebody knows things that I don't know. And they had all gotten better grades. Like, somebody got an A minus, somebody got a B plus. Like, and that was, and now I didn't do as badly in any other class to get a C plus in a philosophy class. Then I was getting like B's, B plus, an occasional A minus. But that was it. Like my first year at UCLA, I had like a 3.2 GPA at the end of that year. And in the group of like 8 of us, I had the lowest GPA. And I'm like, no disrespect, but I'm not the dummy in the group, right? I'm not the worst philosophy student here. Like I just felt like just from talking to them and our discussions, I'm not saying I was the best philosopher in the group, not at that time, but like I certainly wasn't the worst, but I was getting the worst grades. So I'm like, okay. So it took me like almost a full year of writing papers, getting feedback, making my adjustments, revising my papers, talking to professors, talking to TAs, and then I, and then like near the end of the year, I got A's. I'm like, okay. And my buddies, some of them were getting A's, but most of them were not getting A's. So now whatever our my wherever I was in this hierarchy, I was near the top. And then in my second and third year, I only got A's and A minuses. And I'm talking about upper division philosophy classes. Upper division philosophy classes at UCLA, meaning you're walking into a class, there's 30 students, and that means there's only 3 A's available. Because when you go to UCLA, an A means you are in the top 10% of your class. That's how they hand out Latin honors. The Latin honors are, okay, you're in the top 5%, you're in the top 10%, you're in the top 15%. So if you're an A student, means you're in the top 10%. So if there's 30 students, there's only 3 A's. So you're fighting for those 3 A's. In my last 2 years, I only got A minuses and A's. Pretty much even. So like I had like a 3.85 GPA. And honestly, I was still kind of a lazy last minute procrastinator, didn't really edit my work. And so like a lot of those A minuses could have been A's, like if I put more effort. I'm just trying to be as factual as I can be to give you an idea of like what level work I was doing there. So yeah, so I finished like I finished I graduated with a 3 point I think like 597, 596, which I just call a 3.6 because at one time my counselor told me I was going to graduate with a 3.62. I'm like, great, I'll do that. I'll take that. And she's like, or you can finish one more class because I needed one more class to have enough units finished to qualify for Latin honors. I fell short by one class, which was 3 units. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to enroll and pay for a whole new quarter just so I can say I graduated cum laude. I would have graduated cum laude. I had the GPA to graduate cum laude. There's cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. I would have graduated cum laude, which to me would have been nice to say and brag about for the rest of my life, but it wasn't going to be worth the $2,000 tuition. So I was like, screw that. I'll take my 3.62 GPA and just brag about that for the rest of my life. And then I got my official transcripts and they're like 3.596. I'm like, eh. So I still say 3.6 because whatever, it's fractions away from 3.6. And but the fact that I pulled it out from 3.2, yeah, that was good. Like I was very happy about that.